My name is Paul Hassel, and and I am a prevention specialist at this school right here, Basalt Middle School. And actually, this is a new position that was formed this year, and then for the next couple years through CDE, that was kind of set up to provide school health professionals to schools in the valley, specifically to do prevention work. So within that grant, we also got a grant to provide these trainings to parents and professionals and teachers and staff in the schools, so that we could kind of recruit, train people like you to be people that are comfortable talking to youth about marijuana. So this is this presentation tonight is actually not so much a presentation as a training. And so if you could kind of, what we're going to ask you to do is to kind of shift your mindset a little bit to be in a participatory mood and mode, and to be ready to be involved in some activities and some different things. And also some discussion and some games. So in that spirit, we're going to start out with a little challenge here. So I think we can do this. We don't have too many people here tonight. So we're going to do what's called a lineup. And this is a communication challenge, because I think we can all agree that talking to adolescents can be a challenge. And talking to youth can be a challenge, especially about topics that are kind of tricky or delicate. So the way the lineup works is I'm going to have you come up here to this part of the room right up here, okay? And I want you to try to line yourselves up by your birth date, not your age. Okay, don't worry about that. I don't care about age. Birth date. So we'll start over here with January and work our way across. Over here somewhere should be December. Okay? And here's the twist. Can anyone guess?
Without talking.
Without talking. Of course. There's got to be a challenge, right? Okay. So you have to do it without talking. Okay? Now you can come up with whatever communication device you want to use, but I want to challenge you to not speak. Okay? And then once you're lined up, we'll kind of do a quick check, see how well you did, and then we'll talk a little bit about how that went for you. You all down for that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So January, December. Okay. As you're getting close here. Uh-oh. This must be the fall baby area.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good. I kind of, yeah, okay. All right, there was no pressure here. If there's some, I was impressed with your compliance. That's my observation, but we'll get to that. All right, where are we at here? Just the date, month and day. Okay.
February 6th,
March,
May 22nd.
July 2nd,
July 4th? July 9th.
July 11th,
July 23rd,
July 25th.
July 29th.
I didn't know, September 22nd.
August.
August, okay. Okay, there we go.
September 16th.
All right.
September 29th.
September, November 9th.
Okay, I was November 28th.
Over here, October 18th.
Oh, October 18th.
November 26th.
Okay, all right.
December 7th.
Not bad, not bad. Of course, that was one of the main ones. Okay. Everybody go ahead and have a seat.
No wonder I like you so much. What? That's why he was like, when was Charles? I know. Oh, so he's a Leo.
Everybody celebrates.
He's a Cancer.
All right. I won't spend a lot of time debriefing that activity, but just any observations or comments people would like to share about the process of the lineup? Anything that came up for you or that you noticed?
It wasn't easy.
It wasn't easy. Okay.
Well, the month was easy, but the day was a little confusing.
So the general was fairly easy, but the particulars were a little harder. The details. Okay.
No one said I couldn't cheat. So not again.
Yeah. Oh. Oh.
You didn't say
Okay. So you found a loophole.
Super smart.
There you go.
be a teenager.
There you go.
That's what I did.
Okay. Sometimes when we're faced with an uncomfortable situation, we find a loophole, a way to kind of get around that, right? And we can expect that from our kids. You know, they don't want to have a conversation with you about marijuana, so they might find a way to wiggle out of that. Right? Well, you know, the observation I wanted to share was just that was how, besides you, how there was extreme compliance. Okay. You know, people were silent, dead silent, okay? And, you know, if you've ever done these kinds of activities with youth, you know, they really push the limits of the rules. You constantly have to redirect, oh, you can't speak, oh, since you spoke, you have to, you know, now you can only use one hand, and, you know, all this stuff to try to keep them within those limits, right? And so one of the big things tonight that we're going to talk about with communication is that the importance of setting limits and having some structure for your youth so that they can know what's expected and be able to comply with what's expected, right? So a communication challenge is also kind of a relationship challenge, or kind of a compliance challenge. I think is kind of what we're getting at. So tonight, you guys have gathered here to take part in this training. There's a couple of different phrases that have been used for it. To start the conversation kind of addresses this idea that more than just being about marijuana and you know, what you're going to see out there as far as marijuana use, we're really trying to help you guys feel more comfortable, more empowered to have these conversations with youth. But we also want to cover the laws around marijuana use, especially pertaining to youth and underage use. We want to talk a little bit about the health effects of marijuana and kind of talk about how that applies to adolescent and adolescent brain. We're going to look at some data from the Healthy Kids Survey, and we're going to talk a little bit about how data can be our friend in terms of talking to youth, you know, how we can use data to to have those conversations. We're going to talk about youth development and why we really try to discourage kids from using marijuana while their brains are developing. And then lastly, we're going to talk about that conversation and just kind of trying to build your confidence and skills so that you can go and have these conversations with youth, your kids, other kids, students maybe that you work with. Okay? So a little bit about the Healthy Kids Survey. We're going to be going through some data with that, from that. So in 2015, there was this comprehensive health survey done. A pretty large number of sample was taken. I think it was 17,000 kids were surveyed in high schools all across the state and in different places. We also have some data from Basalt High School that I'm going to share with you tonight, just so you can get a real sense of the local picture. But the other data that we're going to be used really talks about the state averages. Okay. Let's see here. You can go ahead and click on. So basically, the survey is extensive. It just, there are so many questions on this thing. So when I've gone through it to farm some data, it took me quite a while to find like these particulars. But the big categories are protective factors. How supported do students feel? It addresses specific health behaviors like drug use, but also nutrition and sleep, sexual health, things like bullying, whether there's an askable adult in their life, someone they can talk to or go to for support. And then there's also quite a bit about social emotional indicators like depression, suicide risk, and also there's some stuff in there about bullying. So I use data a lot with students to challenge their misconceptions about what's normal and the norms of what all their peers are doing, right? And so without fail, whenever I share the data from a survey with kids, they always say, "Oh, everybody's lying on that thing," And I think a lot of us adults are skeptical also of surveys, and especially surveys done with youth. We tend to think, "Oh, they're just kind of making pictures on the dots and everything, and falsifying their answers." But there's actually been meta-analyses done on these surveys that really find that adolescents are just as accurate and honest as adults on these surveys. So they've been validated over and over, and this particular survey has been validated repetitively. Okay, so we have some prizes available to people that are victorious in this trivia game that we're about to do. So what we're going to do here is kind of like what we do sometimes with youth when we're trying to get them to engage around what are the norms among your peers, as far as marijuana use goes, or around cigarette use or alcohol use, and we try to get them to kind of guess what they think the percentage of youth or underage use is, and then we give them the actual numbers to challenge those misconceptions, because invariably they guess too high, right? So that's the purpose of this. So we're going to kind of do that with you now, and what I'd like you to do is kind of do this as a team. So at your tables, maybe you can kind of put your heads together and come up with a percentage, and let's see, maybe you could write it down if you guys need pencils or pens. There we go. And we'll see how you guys do. Thank you. Do that to you. Pass it on around here.
You were ready for
Okay.
so prepared. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh
by.
Yeah, I'd say. Okay. Y'all ready? All right, so make a guess, put your heads together, come up with a percentage of Colorado young people that smoked cigarettes in the past 30 days.
Do we include vaping?
Oh, so these are
So cigarettes.
taken from the sample of high school students that were surveyed. So it's all high school age kids.
Do you include
The survey
vaping?
was
And is it in the side?
9 through 12. Yep.
Do you include vaping in that?
Not a cigarette.
This is smoked cigarettes. Just cigarettes, not vaping. Yeah, just cigarettes.
You like 13?
What do you think?
Oh, okay.
How about
I'd say,
40?
You think 10?
I think it's higher. I think maybe that's when I was in school. I think probably about, I don't know, 30.
You say 10? And he gives maybe a hint. He says people tend to think it's higher than it normally
I
is.
think we have enough, you know, we could.
That's what he said. That's what I want to use. I think we have a 15. All right?
There you go.
What would you candy for him? Okay. You guys have a number?
Uh-huh.
All right, go ahead and you can hold your number up, or I probably won't be able to see it. We can maybe go around and I can. 40%, 15%,
30.
30,
10.
10,
13.
13. Okay. All right, let's see what we got closest here.
Wait, no.
9%.
We got the answers prior to.
All right, I probably should have clarified. I think this first one we were doing just the state average, right?
Right.
Is that what everyone's understanding was? Okay.
What's the state at?
So on the left is it shows the trends, and you can see the 2015 survey here is the average. Okay. So I asked you how many had smoked cigarettes, right? That was the question. The bottom line here is that have smoked a cigarette at least once in the last 30 days. This one has smoked a cigarette at least once in their lifetime. So let's go with the top number, since that was the. I didn't. Did I say 30 days?
Yeah,
you said 30 days. Sorry, my bad. Okay, so we'll go with the bottom number. Is 9%. Right? 9%. The state average.
Yeah.
The salt is 13.4%. But we'll go with the 9%. So we had a 10, didn't we? Okay, you guys got it. Now, what we have here, we have a little dilemma. We have these medication lock bags as prizes, okay? And if someone at your table would like a medication lock bag, we can give you one. Anyone? Or we have candy.
We'll bring one over, we'll check it out.
Yeah, check it out. Okay.
Wait.
Yeah.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
The woman who wrote July 11th, I think she Googled the answer.
We have to watch this one. Okay, let's click on to the next one here. We'll get another question. Okay. All right, so this is a similar question.
Funny.
Do you want to do, should we do a basalt high guess? Just to change it up? Okay, so this is the local, again, it's an average of all the high school students' responses, but it's just basalt high. Okay, can we do that? So a percentage of basalt high school students that said they used marijuana in the past 30 days. Yeah, it's self-report. Yep. That's right.
2015, right?
Okay, 2015 Healthy Kids Survey.
For state of
What do you
Colorado.
think?
Or the salt.
Yeah, we're just doing the salt on it. Salt high.
Marijuana in the past. From Basalt High School.
Because Basalt High School, about 13% tried the cigarette. So, I mean, of the marijuana.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just check. That's good. Okay. You guys have
You
a,
want to do 15 again, or?
got a number? Okay. I'm gonna start coming around here. We got 25%.
18.
18.
18. 18. 20 and 25. Oh man, that's
But
gonna
we'll
be
even
close.
go up if it's not be equal. Go to 27.
Okay. Okay, so Basalt High, 18.1% said they used marijuana in the past 30 days.
Oh, my.
So we have a tie there, don't we? Yeah, 25, 18 and 18. Okay. Any interest in a medication lockback? 18.1%. You were closer, technically. Do you write that in after? Okay. Some people are asking about the medication lockbacks. So this is not just for weed. You know, if you have prescription medications that you want to keep out of the hands of children or youth in your home, that would work for that as well. I just rented out my house over spring break, and I came back afterward, and I was like, oh, you know, we don't have lots of pain medication in our medicine cabinet, but there was a bottle of I think Percocet or something, and I just, you know, I was like, oh, I shouldn't have left that in the medicine cabinet, you know, for my renters to be tempted by. So I could have used one of those. So
I'll take one.
you were still there. Okay.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
What year was marijuana
Does it
legalized?
stop dogs from
2000.
Well, I think dogs don't get into just about anything. You know,
broken mine? The plastic one, you know, that you put your medication in? Oh,
Am I wrong?
I know.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Yeah.
2009, medical in 2014 for recreation.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. I thought it was. Okay.
That's why it.
Appreciate that.
She's the trouble. She's the one that likes some of my medication.
So the big, yeah, I think the reason you're asking is because you're doing this math in your head about was there an increase in youth marijuana use when the drug was legalized, and so, you know, really it's too soon to tell. I mean, that's the big takeaway, but there hasn't been a big increase since legalization according to this data, you know, but really it's not a great indicator because it's just 1 year really of effect. So this, or 2017, they did another Healthy Kids survey, and we don't have the data from that yet, but soon that'll give us a little better idea of if there's been an increase in youth use. So, you know, I have students often guessing like 90%. Oh, I bet 90% of my peers are using marijuana. This is way off, you know. So even if you could, you know, they're saying, oh, but you know, people are lying on the survey. So I say, well, you know, really, what the research says is that they're not lying. You know, these are accurate surveys. But let's say even if, you know, some people were lying, it still would reflect the general pattern, right? You know, you're talking about 18% compared to your guess, which was 90%. You're guessing too high. You know, not as many people use marijuana as you think are using it. And that's the big point, you know, that you're trying to make. Because that is a huge part of what influences their decision to try or not. It's like, well, is everyone else doing it? It must be safe. If everyone else is doing it, that's the crazy logic of adolescent. So that's operating there. Okay.
Excuse me. Well, why do you think so many more students are trying marijuana compared to cigarettes. That's quite a big,
I think
that's a
the
big difference.
perception is safe. You know. Cigarettes, there's just been this long education campaign around cigarettes and the dangers of cigarettes, and even the industry itself has kind of jumped on that as a way to almost market its product. Cigarettes are addictive. You know, those big full-page ads in the magazines about cigarettes, and they're almost kind of, I think they're kind of using that to, hoping to maybe pull in some people that are prone to that.
Thank you.
It feels like marijuana is going the exact opposite way, especially in Colorado. It just seems like, oh, it's great, everyone's doing it. It's just the whole legalization. To me, that message to youth is it's available, it's okay, it's acceptable, it's, there's ads
Right.
all over. So it's like almost the exact opposite of the way cigarettes.
I think you bring up a really good point. I don't mean to step on your toes, but this is something that we are seeing in the schools. My name is Paul Huffling, I'm Huff, and I work in the schools with the kids. And it's something that we are seeing. The kids don't touch cigarettes much anymore, except to maybe carry a pack around that they put joints in. Because they're rolled so tightly now when they get them through the medical marijuana places that they look like cigarettes, and they'll put them upside down in a pack of cigarettes, and you just look at it and you think that there's just cigarettes, but if you go through them,
Those aren't cigarettes?
these are.
Oh,
But
okay.
I just threw them out here because this is what kids are doing, is I just got cigarettes, and they're just.
Yeah.
But if you look closely, there's probably 3 or 4 joints in there. And that's what we find a lot of times, is there's 3 or 4 joints rolled in the cigarettes. The cigarettes, they don't ever smoke. But the whole perception to the kids is that marijuana is legal, okay? It was voted legal by us, you guys, adults, who supposedly know what's right and what's wrong. If you look at the numbers, Pitkin County was the number 2 county in the state of Colorado to vote for legalization of marijuana. Where was the other one? Telluride, number 1. Okay? So the kids that you talk to in the resort towns have the attitude that, well, it's legal, of course we're going to do it. We see that quite a bit. And I hear it when I talk to kids about it. It's that kids, just one second, they're looking at the stats. When it was legalized, I had kids spouting to me the exact percentages of how the adults voted for marijuana, and they felt that if the adults who supposedly know better made it legal, then it should be okay for them.
So I just wanted to point out that cigarettes are legal and alcohol is legal. So is it because it's newly legal?
I believe that has a lot to do with it. I believe it has a lot to do with it because one of the things I'm seeing up at my end of the valley, and Thomas, correct me if I'm wrong down here, is that alcohol use is going this way and marijuana use is going this way. That's what I'm seeing. And it's because of a lot of different things, I think. One, the way kids can use marijuana now is completely different than it was when, and I don't want to offend anybody about age or anything, but when we were kids. Back then it was, you got a joint or something and it was ditchweed and it stunk, and you could point out the kids in your classroom that had been out during the day smoking marijuana.
Spicoli, yeah.
But now, well, yes, Spicoli's a good example. But now, with all these new devices, he could be smoking pot right there, and I wouldn't even know it. So that's what we're up against. Kids use alcohol, very easy to detect. There's an odor. There's things that, happen when kids are drinking. The marijuana, not so much anymore. You might get the red eyes, but there's Visine. There's something and they can use for it.
Easier to cover it up.
So it's a lot harder to detect marijuana use than it is any of the other things that are out there right now.
And we're going to look at some of
And
the
we are, and I'm
comparative-
sorry I didn't wanna
No,
step on your
no,
toes,
I
but I
just, you know,
thought, yeah,
we
can
are
maybe
going to look
help
at some
her
of
a
that
little bit.
comparative data between, you know, some of the different substances and what's more common, so.
I just want to comment, can I make a comment?
Sure.
Or kind of to add to what you said, I feel like in our community, we have a somewhat healthy community. People are very active and very focused on eating well and exercising and that sort of thing. However, and therefore, I do not know anybody in this community, none of my friends smoke cigarettes. And so I think this children look to their parents, well, they don't do it.
Right?
However,
That's true.
everybody, I feel like
I know
everybody
exactly where you're going, and you are 100% correct.
And so if the parents are setting this example, then the kids think it's okay.
You're right,
And they think
you're right.
it's less risky.
And you get those people that they're gonna go for their hike, and they're gonna, you know, then they're gonna go skiing, and they're gonna do this, and they're gonna go do that. Yet they're gonna go home, and right before dinner, they're gonna smoke. And the kids see that. The kids pick up on that. And so if adults are doing it, then the kids think it's okay. And by us voting with such high numbers that marijuana should be legal in the state of Colorado, our kids see that.
But are they drinking because you're drinking a glass of wine?
Sometimes. I mean, well, let's talk about this. Where do the kids get their booze most of the time?
Your parents' house.
From your liquor cabinet, right? Where are the kids getting the marijuana? A lot of times they're getting it out of your sock drawer. If that's where you keep it. Because we're finding that when we catch kids with marijuana at school, they're in these kind of containers, which come from the medical or the marijuana shops, you know, and the kids are just taking them right out of the drawers. You know, I've asked kids where they gotten them at home. You know, it's something that's out there, and I think you brought up a really good point. So thanks for doing that. And I'm gonna step back and try to be quiet.
No,
I
those
told
are-
you I had to
those are
keep me
good-
from running my mouth.
And, you know, I believe it was, when it was legalized to be regulated like, just like alcohol. That was how, I mean, that wasn't the exact wording, but that was basically the gist of it. And I think you're right, you know, later we're gonna talk about, you know, how kids, how much influence you have as parents on your kids' decisions. But not just your kids, like, as an askable, trusted adult, you know, just maybe some other kid that you have an influence to. Okay, so, and this kind of speaks to this too, right? So, even though use is lower than we might think, fewer students see it as risky. You know, so it kind of goes back to that thing you asked about why is it going up. So this compares marijuana with other substances, and this is at least once in their lifetime. This is at least once in their lifetime data. So obviously heroin is really low compared to marijuana. Alcohol still is the most used substance among youth. And so,
But just so you guys know, in the last quarter, the alcohol tax versus the marijuana tax are now even. So that marijuana is catching up to the alcohol.
but the adults,
Just grab me.
right, is weighing into that. So we're really focused on the youth. I mean, you know, we're not gonna debate, you know, but I'm just saying, you know, like, we're looking at, you know, I don't wanna say we're not worried about adults using drugs, you know, that's not the message we're giving. But we're not as concerned about adult use of marijuana and alcohol. It's simply not as dangerous for adults. You know, I could start smoking weed today, and it probably wouldn't have that much effect on my brain. It really wouldn't. I'm not going to do that, but, you know, from a physiological point of view, it's probably not that big of an effect. But for a kid who's 15, it's huge. So that's why we're so focused on that.
The same is not true for alcohol, though, so that's kind of shocking for me.
Moderate alcohol use, though. You know, Yeah, binge drinking, that could be harmful.
More
to
than
anyone,
one
but-
drink per night has statistically been shown to increase the risk for dementia as you age.
Yeah,
And it's cumulative, so I'm actually quite shocked to hear. But that's my medical mind going.
yeah, no.
Okay.
Uh,
I don't know if I totally agree.
So, okay, we're gonna do another little trivia thing here, okay, you ready? So this is shifting gears a little bit. This is more about that, more broader mental health picture of, our youth in school. So young people that have an adult to go to for help with a serious problem are blank times less likely to attempt suicide. So you're guessing what percentage less likely? It's a percentage, right? I believe so. Percentage. How much or how many times less likely? I'm sorry, it's not a percentage. I was wrong. How many times? How many times less likely?
9 times.
No, I know the percentage. I don't know.
You got some guesses? Here, we'll start in the back over here. Please
Well,
guess.
we don't like this standard, we don't like we think it's 95% less likely, so when you're saying times, I don't know,
Right,
times
that would be
against
like-
what,
Right.
so.
Let's just
Um,
So we think 95% less
Okay,
likely.
so that would be like 1 times, 2 times
Oh,
more
because
likely,
100%
right?
is one.
It's kind of what, yeah. What do you think? Did you already say?
No, we didn't.
Yeah, that's it, like.
Tricky question.
Yeah.
It really is.
Because
when
there's
you
an
think about
adult
it.
there to go to doesn't mean they're going to.
Yeah, so
It's more
is
about
this,
the interaction and.
right, so are you basing it on
I think it
because
makes
of
it
Well,
committed
yeah,
suicide?
Yeah,
and-
so,
I hope.
well, no, the question is phrased, on the survey, the question is phrased, do you have an adult that you can go to for help if you're in serious trouble? So that's the basis, that's what it is.
Let's just give it to us all.
Okay. Well, I haven't even heard, we got 2%. What'd you guys
Make an
say?
executive decision.
10 times more likely? 3.5. Oh, interesting. Interesting figure you just pulled out there. Okay.
3.5.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, let's see. I don't even know how to hand out that prize. Results are tainted. Would anyone like a medicine lock bag? I'm having a hard time selling these. These were a big hit elsewhere in the valley. Okay, she'll take one. There we go. All right. Okay, so mental health. The reason that we're showing you this is because one of the big concerns with marijuana use among youth is that we're really concerned about youth developing a habit where they're using marijuana to kind of self-medicate mental health problems, right? So, it's just more likely to occur when they're in adolescence. Maybe they try, they're experimenting, and it's just for fun, but then it's like, this kind of helps me feel less sad, or, takes the edge off if I'm nervous. And then that's where you are kind of moving a little bit more toward a substance abuse pattern or even an addiction. So let's see, we've got, my eyes are bad here. Okay, so this is about making a suicide plan versus making an attempt. So the top line is on the left is the state average, okay, which has gone up over the last few years there to 14%, have made a plan. Okay, the bottom line is showing that had made an attempt in the last
Probably reverse it,
year.
right?
Yeah.
One thing that's interesting to me is when you break it down to population of 480 students in our high school, that's 39.36 kids that have made a plan. when we look at 8.2, it
That's right.
kinda doesn't give you the impact.
Mhm.
So we have 39.36 kids that have made
That's a
suicide.
good point. Yeah. Yep.
I think it's a lot more impactful for the education and seeing what the
Yeah,
impact is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. This is a slide that just talks about how much more at risk LGBTQ youth are at for mental health problems and suicidal planning and thinking. That's all right. Okay, so this is kind of segueing into, why we're kind of having this training tonight, which is that it has been shown that it makes a big difference if kids have someone to turn to, a trusted adult to turn to in their life. So much less risky behavior is shown with marijuana use. It says they're 1.7 times less likely to use marijuana if they have a teacher that cares about them and encourages them. Youth alcohol use. Youth who can ask a parent, guardian, or other adult for help are 1.5 times less likely to binge drink. And then about tobacco use. If they feel safe at school, they're 3 times less likely to smoke a cigarette. I remember, Thomas in one of his presentation a month ago that I helped him with, talked about how a lot of students already, have developed the habit of using cigarettes as stress relief. And that's just that kind of budding addictive pattern where, found that kind of medical benefit as far as anxiety is concerned. And then that last thing about just being involved in extracurricular activities is a protective factor. So adults make a difference, especially parents who have rules and enforce the rules. They provide some structure and guidance. And then just simply the parents' opinions and beliefs about the drug. Not necessarily even, I think, it's, what you're doing speaks more than what you say is the, belief. But what this is measuring is the actual parent's opinion or belief about the drug being wrong to use.
Can I ask a question on that
Yeah.
one, just, because I think what's interesting to me is kind of, I think the piece about that marijuana was, behind closed doors for so long and people are hiding it. And I feel like now that it's legal, people are still hiding it, people who might use it, in an whatever, to say, casually I might use marijuana, that's fine. I don't want my kids to use it, I don't think it's appropriate for a kid, but I think it skews the conversation because they're still trying to hide it, rather than being more open. So I don't know, I guess it would be interesting to hear more about that piece of
Yes.
the conversation,
So
about
later-
not trying to hide it, and then kids go, well, they're hiding it, so I should hide it too.
Yeah. Later in the presentation, we're going to really talk more about the conversation and some of the challenges with the conversation. And I would encourage you to think about that piece of, well, I drink, I drink a moderate amount of wine during the week, or, I drink beer, or, maybe some of you even use weed. How do I talk to my kid about their use? I think it's a valid question, right? Because that's probably one of the most common things is that, I'm sitting here having a beer and saying, no, you can't drink. So how do you address that with kids? How do you have that conversation? We'll get to that.